running for office again. And this year we may even need another candidate. Well, we'll see about that. Anyway, it's been a laugh a minute, this campaign. And I like running for office, even though I've never won one, except this one, of course. In our UU tradition, senior ministers are elected by the congregation rather than being assigned by anybody. That's a critical part of the democracy that we value and further. So I've won one election, at least in my life. In the larger political realm, though, this is my third run for president. I also ran for pope. Running for pope was the most fun because I had so little to lose, not being Catholic. Running for president of my own beloved nation, it's a different matter. I have a stake in this. And it's been an election about candidates and their personalities and their pasts, about who has earned how much money and in what way they've spent it and how they've sheltered it from taxes, and very little talk about the issues. Which is why I've gotten no press. I have a seriously boring past. Neither wealth, nor bankruptcies, nor email servers, nor clandestine videos. Now, on the other hand, I am a woman. That's obviously very interesting in a negative sort of way to lots of people who equate being a woman with being weak, emotional, and prone to hormone-driven hissy fits. But that does not describe me, as I am sure you know best of all. It's true that I have little foreign policy or military experience, but I am wise enough to know when I need help, and I have my campaign advisor to help me learn what I need to know. Thanks again, Kelsey, for your service. We only have time to cover 3 points of my platform this morning. It's shocking how little you can say in 20 minutes sometimes, and then there's whatever Kelsey wants to add. These issues are the economy, policing, and what makes a nation great. They're all about democracy, and democracy, as you may know, the furtherance of the democratic process in our nation as well as in this microcosm that our churches are, is one of the purposes of the congregations that we cherish. And so this morning, we are going to further it. First of all, an economy that supports democracy. Now, on the one hand, here's the truth of the matter. The American economy is flourishing. Although we had a huge scare 8 years ago, we've had a slow but thorough comeback from the brink of disaster. Last year, household income grew by 5.2%, the single largest increase since the 1960s. And for the first time in nearly as long, the gains were shared across the income spectrum. 3.5 million people climbed out of poverty last year. The unemployment rate is about 5%, and our future looks bright. American companies are doing cutting-edge work on the next set of the innovations that will shape our lives: robots, drones, driverless cars, artificial intelligence, space, stem cells. We have no need to fear for the basic robustness of our economy. What we do have to worry about is the basic justice of our economy. If I am elected, I will work tirelessly to unravel the basic injustice that has allowed the shocking and dangerous level of wealth inequality which we now have in our beloved country. In spite of last year's success in sharing the wealth of recovery, the fact of the matter is that too much of the wealth of the nation has been sequestered by a very few people at the tippy top of the economic pyramid, many of whom are not as smart or as good job creators as they fancy themselves, but are simply ruthless and unprincipled. And it is also true that they collectively have gamed the system so that it is perfectly legal for them to pay no taxes, taking advantage of loopholes not available to you and me. The result of this is not just a bunch of playboys and playgirls with too much money to hoard. The result is a tax-deprived government at all levels, unable to fund the basic services and protections that a government is supposed to fund, and a stressed upper middle class, and a worried middle class with no savings, and a furious working class, and a completely disheartened, impoverished class. Those latter two groups of people taken together, constitute 40% of Americans. And if you gave that 40% of Americans the proportion of land on this continent that equates with their portion of wealth, 40% of Americans would own the land equivalent to a generous definition of Houston, Texas, and its outskirts. At the same time, just one family, the Walton family, has that much wealth. And with the rest of the tippy top, the 0.1% of the wealthy, they own the wealth equivalent of the northwest quarter of the United States. Do you need much more explanation for the fact that the U.S., like England and lately like Colombia, has a very large, rebellious voting population who is ready to wreak any kind of havoc on the off chance that something might change? If I am elected president, my foremost goal will be to preserve the experiment of democracy in this land. And my first objective will be legislation and policies that will, for the good of democracy, begin to reverse this trend of the accumulation of massive wealth. Smart, innovative, hardworking people should be well compensated, of course, but we all need to remember that the more a person owns, the more they owe the government that protects them and their wealth, that provides the infrastructure which has allowed them to make that wealth. They deserve a good life, of course, but nobody deserves to own 40% of the economy. Nobody is that smart or that dedicated or that hardworking. Give me a break. The only way to own 40% of the economy is to strong-arm the system into letting you take, and take. And now it's clear. The exceedingly wealthy have taken so much that our shared enterprise of democracy is at risk. Secondly, if I'm elected, I will preserve democracy by attending to the crisis of policing that we are currently facing. There are two truths here that seem to me to be self-evident. The first is that there is no democracy without policing. For when criminals get the upper hand, then it's not a democracy anymore, it's an oligarchy, the rule of the powerful rather than the rule of the chosen. And, secondly, there is no democracy without just, temperate, and skillful policing. For when the police are free to kill, take the property of, or rough up anybody they take a dislike to, it's not a democracy, but an oligarchy, the rule of the powerful, in this case, the police. We've developed a problem in this nation with police, backed up by laws and unions and systems which allow the police to take property, rough up, and even kill people who are doing exactly what they're being told to do, or who are reacting in a completely human, if unskilled way, when confronted with police whom they have more and more reason to fear. The cavalier and careless way police and courts across the nation have shrugged off or covered up mistakes, racism, and out evil perpetrated against African Americans has given rise to the Black Lives Matter movement for good reason. But all lives and all freedoms are in jeopardy when the police are out of control. This is not a new problem. We've had it before. We may have had it all the time. But the technology of cameras used by both police and civilians have made it both newly visible and newly fixable. If I'm elected, I'll step up to work on this issue, and not just with police departments, which have amassed horror stories, but with whole systems of policing. The federal government can do more than offer old military equipment to police departments. The federal government can develop training for this changed policing environment in which many persons are carrying guns, just as a for instance. They can collect information to help us understand the problem of police brutality so that we can better understand it, just to name two urgent priorities. We need to continue the work of the Justice Department in ending innumerable practices which put the oversight of police into the hands of other police. The owners of video footage taken from dash and body cameras should belong to the public in the form of well-trained, well-informed civilian oversight police boards. Officer statements about shootings should be taken immediately, just like everybody else's statements are. The criminal justice system learned long ago that this is the best way to get the evidence which is closest to the truth from human beings with their fallible memories and their fanciful self-justifications. A person who has a badge is not immune to their humanity. This is not rocket science. This is common sense. Here's another bit of common sense. A person who holds the power of instant death over the public should have more training than a person who cuts hair. Don't you think? Did you know that in order to qualify as a police officer in Albuquerque, you must complete 1,040 hours of training? That's half a year at 40 hours a week. To be a barber, on the other hand, you have to complete 1,600 hours of training. Almost 50% more. This is nuts. American police are more poorly trained than most police forces in the wealthy world. 2 years of college-level work is the norm. A better educated, better trained police force, which is not in the news for killing innocent or non-threatening persons, is a police force to which more Americans will want to work for. And the result will be more diversity and a better situation for both the police and the public. Of course, financing that would take a taxing plan that would allow cities to do more than bare-bones funding, which gets us back to our lopsided tax system, which exempts the rich from paying their fair share of the costs of running a nation. And by the way, when the rich are paying what they can and should pay, the tax revolt will soon be over. When the costs of a decent society are shared fairly, most people are willing to do their share. Another policing area which needs to change is that we need to quit relying on our criminal justice system to be our major provider of mental health services in our nation, which it currently is. When people have a mental health crisis, they and their families should be able to rely on responders from the mental health field, not policemen. And they should be able to have gotten help for a crisis before it spiraled out of control. Of course, there are many, many good police officers who are doing their level best to police in a controlled, skillful, just, and even compassionate manner. But the system needs an overhaul for democracy to function and for our nation to live up to its ideal of justice for all. What makes a nation great? This nation was founded in democracy and in diversity by seekers of opportunity from many lands. And our greatness is in continuing to be and getting better at being who we most deeply are. The fundamental thing that makes America great, that gives us our unique energy, is the fact that we've been involved for 250 years now in a project of drawing an ever wider circle around who counts in our nation, around who gets to be the real American. From the days when the only Americans who really counted were land-owning white men, the circle has gotten ever larger. Now the real Americans who count are rich and poor, women and men, people of every racial and ethnic heritage from every corner of the planet, and also the once despised or invisible, the elderly, sexual minorities, the disabled. It's been a grand project of expanding justice. It has changed what we look like, and it is who we are. It's been a project wrought in pride and in pain. To expand a circle, you have to break it and form it again. And while that's going on, there is anger and chaos and anxiety and acting out and often even violence. We're in such a time now. And this election season has been disappointing. and that has revealed that lots of people are not really with that diversity program and would prefer retreat to a smaller circle in which they feel more central and more safe. Even the ones who are not angry or ugly about it have shown that they wouldn't mind if it happened. This has made me sad, but it has shown me the truth, and I truly believe that knowing the truth will make us free. Now we know where we stand. Now we know what is the work for us to do. I will do this work no matter who is elected for president. I know that you, in your own way, will do so too. We've had these issues before as a nation and resolved them. We've been through the change and pain of change before. We've been through slavery and the massive cost of ending slavery. We've been through the Gilded Age. We've seen resistance to immigration and resistance to fair treatment of working people. And we've seen populist movements and repression and police brutality. And we've come to this point in our history, and we will continue. We will be reminded by the new Americans of the value of freedom. We will bring along the reluctant, and we will share the pain of change, and we will remember that everybody has worth and dignity, no matter what they feel or think, even if they have to be stopped from doing what they're doing. We'll do this because it needs to be done, and because we've got some massive issues facing us. Terrorism is terrifying, even if it's not actually very dangerous. Gun violence is tragic, even though there is a lot less of it than the car accidents that we take for granted. Both international events, especially in the Middle East, and global warming are going to require our government to be more skillful than it has been before. And just as the cost of change and disruptions must be shared within a nation, so they must be shared in an ever smaller world. And now my campaign manager, Kelsey Atherton, has something he wants to add. Kelsey, what did you have in mind?
Thank you. Christine, I know you spoke stewardship last month about what it meant to specifically take up the task of caring for the faith community that nurtured you growing up. I'm here to speak to another task of stewardship the kind presidents specifically have to do. And as fair warning, I come to this from my day job where I work as a journalist writing about military technology. The president, it turns out, is a steward of a great many terrible things. We live now, as we have lived since 1945, with nuclear weapons and the knowledge that at our nation's disposal is a singular kind of tool that can bring great harm to a great many people all at once. There are 1,000 or more of these weapons stored at Kirtland, just on the southern edge of town, and there are 6,000 other warheads elsewhere in this country. Since 1949, other peoples besides Americans have had access to that sort of horrific power. But Americans were the first, and Americans are the only ones who have a say over who gets to control our nuclear arsenal. This is not, I should clarify, a stewardship we choose. No one wants to enter the world with the burden of a nuclear arsenal weighing on their shoulders. And yet, this is a stewardship we have. And only by taking that responsibility seriously can we hope to manage it responsibly. Part of that responsibility, in my view, is greatly reducing the size of active nuclear arsenals through diplomacy. The United States and Russia both signed the New START Treaty in 2010, which called for a reduction of between 1/2 and 2/3 of deployed nuclear weapons. Work like this is vital yet insufficient for the stewardship task of preventing an apocalypse. Other movements, like the Global Zero campaign, work towards a world without any nuclear weapons for anyone at all. The presidency cannot, as much as I may wish it were so, control the actions of other nuclear nations. For people who grew up in the Cold War, this may be a grim truth you remember. For people like myself who grew up after the fall of the Berlin Wall, this is a grim reality we are learning for the first time. We can guess at how Russia will act, but we don't know for sure. And that's even more true for North Korea, whose young dictator excitedly shows off new weapons every few months. Christine, I think that this should be an explicit part of your campaign, that voters are entrusting the next president with a terrible power. They must know what you think about these issues. They must come to trust you as a responsible steward of America's power.
Thank you, Kelsey. Important words. So, the game is up. It's been fun, but Christine isn't running for president anymore. Because Christine believes, as do most UUs, that working for democracy and furthering the democratic process is one of our sacred obligations. So we don't fool around with elections. We don't play with our votes. Don't throw your vote away. And don't neglect to vote just because I have left the arena. Vote for the person who's most likely to carry more of your values into the government than their opponents. Just vote. It's the only way to move forward, and that is our only option, to keep on moving forward. We're gonna keep on moving forward. Keep on moving forward. Keep on moving forward. Never turning back. Turning back. Gonna keep on moving proudly. Moving proudly. Keep on moving proudly. Never turning back. Turning back. Gonna keep on singing loudly. Keep on singing loudly. Keep on singing loudly. Never turning back. Never turning back. Vamos adelante. Vamos adelante. Now, therefore, since the struggle deepens, since evil abides and good does not always prosper, let us gather the strength we have, the resilience, the courage, that whether the victories of the future are small or large, we will keep on moving forward, and a world awaited will be someday a world attained. Go in peace.